program at Tennessee State University, as well as some of the notable personalities associated with that particular program. Of course, Coach, let's continue our discussion.
The final thing that I learned from Ed Temple, and it might have been the most important of all, Doctor, was that athletics only has a place in schools if they emphasize academics. Now, if the athletics are not emphasized, then there's no place for athletics in the academic program. The question arises, why? To begin with, what purpose is it serving? So what I learned from Ed Temple was that you had to take an active role in the academics of you. So as a result of being influenced by him, I started a study hall at Tennessee State University. I forced our players who needed to take tutors, and I monitored their relationship with their tutors. We have what we call the progress attendance report that had to be in my hands by 4 o'clock every Friday. And this attendance report let us know how our players were doing, whether or not they missed classes.
And the simple fact of attending class.
And attending classes, whether or not they were behaving properly in classes, and all of these things. And taking this active role in the life, I think is extremely important. Today, if I looked out over our state of Tennessee, I relate Pat Summitt and Ed Temple similar in that they pay attention to all those levels of their athletes. So the graduation numbers are just phenomenal. Their success with their athletes is outstanding. Those people go on beyond. And then as Ed Temple, and I think Coach Summitt, they follow their athletes even after they leave them. And they're there for them, even way after they've left. But they do an outstanding job. I think that a youngster between 17 and 23 in college, they're making decisions that that affect the rest of their lives. But the problem is, these are the first times that those young people have an opportunity to make this. Before this, their parents made all of the important decisions in their life. Now, all of a sudden, these youngsters are making life-affecting decisions with minimal background experience in making these kinds of decisions. So now you're going to have problems, and you're going to have mistakes, because there's a learning process that has to go along with making life-important decisions. I'm really interested in the situation there with Pac-Man, because my experience tells me this, Doctor, that if a youngster comes to you from a situation that has not had the discipline, that is a poverty situation, that has not had the tutoring and the leadership, you can't leave those to their own devices. These kinds of youngsters must be handled with a short leash. They must be handled in a serious, no joking kind of thing, because there's so much that needs to be done in their lives. Now, you can't leave them to their own devices. You can't be, well, I guess, easy with them. You must be fair. You must be honest. But you must be stringent, because their life and their background prior to coming to you, they've needed this. Now, if you don't step into the void and afford that what I would call tough love, you're losing.
Right.
And the youngsters that we lose because they've had money and successes, we lose them because they're now making decisions, life lesson decisions, and they really don't have the background to make them. They still must be tutored through that period. And while you're doing this, doctor, in my estimation, you must exhibit to them tough love.
Good.
And without it, they will be at their own devices too often, and there's where trouble starts. And I think in this case, that's exactly one of the things that has occurred.
You know, you've dealt with a number of pro athletes, sending them from Tennessee State University to the big league, so to speak. What are some of the characteristics you think that over the last 4 minutes, and let's talk about it from that perspective, what are some of the characteristics that you think are necessary in order for a person to make it at that level, at the next level?
Well, when I was doing this, see, there were times when Tennessee State University would have more people sign professional contracts at the end of the year than all of the other schools in the state combined. That seems a little, but that's the truth. What I found was that our kids, most of the time, were players on their first year, which indicated that, to me, that the background that they were receiving from Tennessee State was sufficient enough to help them as rookies. Now that was in all areas. I can recall years ago, I had a problem with the Dallas Cowboys because the Dallas Cowboys wanted to give a 12-minute IQ test to our players, and I asked, the fellow who wanted to do it was named Gil Brandt, and I asked Gil, I says, now, do you give this same test to the players in Notre Dame? And he says, well, this is a test that we see. It's very complicated pro football, and we have to make certain that they have really the intellect to digest it. I says, now, you're talking about players that I've taught, and football is not Chinese calculus. And so what I'm saying is, if you think you want to give our players a test that you don't give all players, you're mistaken, and you can't give that test here. And we had a big difficulty there, and I think for a while I was blackballed from the National Football League because I insisted that if they gave an IQ test, that they gave it to all football players everywhere, then include Tennessee State in that. But to say that at a historically black institution that the player here is somehow not quite smart enough, I thought was an embarrassing and an erroneous assumption. And I was not going to be a part of it. Now we have some outstanding black coaches who were a big part of that, and they fostered that. But I could not see that, not for our players. So for 10 years, the Dallas Cowboys were not allowed to scout on our campus until they changed that policy. And when they changed that policy, then we began to, and they right away took several of our players. But until they were open enough to extend that test to all players, I thought it was so racially motivated until I would be doing our players an injustice by going along with a program that was not in their best interest. And I didn't see that to be in their best interest.
Coach, we're going to have to end this with this last segment here. We've got about half a minute. But let me thank you for coming by and giving us that information. And as I said before, it took us a long time to get around to this particular conversation. But whether you know it or not, this is a conversation that I've been trying to bring into being over the last 10 or 12 years. And so even though we were able to get together only now, you've been on our mind, and your position in terms of what has happened in professional football from Tennessee State University on through has played a very, very important part in the overall activity of the National Football League. And of course, you know that and everybody else knows. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.